Test, test. Yep, coming in. Great.
Hello, you're muted. Hello,
Yes,
you're muted. No, I mean the presentation is muted.
I have not started presenting yet, but can you hear me online? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear. Perfect. Okay, we're going to get started in just a moment. Making sure I have everything I need.
Hear you fine.
Test, test, test. Hello, great. Okay. I am ready to go. I don't know if you're introducing, I don't know. Okay, great. Then grab a mic so that people online can hear you. Let's just do a check, do a sound check. Can you hear all, let's see, talk into that.
Hello, hello.
Can you all hear Judy online? Oop. Can you hear Judy online?
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Can you
Hey,
hear Rabbi
Karen,
Eric?
how are
Okay.
you? Karen,
Talk
can
nice and loud.
Karen, can you hear me?
Okay. So I think you're good.
All right.
Oh, thanks. Here, I'll put it here.
We're going to start. Hi. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank This is
A little louder, I think.
all right. This is the second presentation to introduce the three Abrahamic religions that meet here at 6601 Bradley Boulevard. My name is Judy Ozoni, and I'm a co-chair of the ICPC, which is the Intercongregational Partnership Committee, along with Evelyn Gansglass. Evelyn, raise your hand. And Shaheen Khan, raise your hand. There you are. From the Makame Ibrahim Islamic Center. We're a busy group, and there are flyers about what ICPC is, as well as some of our upcoming activities. And those events include a book discussion next Tuesday at 7 o'clock here in Covenant Hall. The book is on Undocumented Americans by Carla Vicencio. I butchered that name, I'm sorry. The third presentation of this Abrahamic Religions series will be given by Pastor David Gray on Christianity on November 11th at 7 o'clock here, again in Covenant Hall. Also in November is our Interfaith Sunday, and it's our biggest event. The service is at 10:30, during which we celebrate our partnership and aspects of each faith are celebrated. Following the service is our interfaith brunch, and we hope everyone will join us. It's in Memorial Hall, and there's usually about 150 people, so everyone is welcome. So, ever so briefly, if the rabbi is ready.
I am ready. I can't.
Okay. Rabbi Eric Abbott, who has been the leader of Bethesda Jewish Congregation since
2022.
2022.
2 months after my daughter was born.
And he's known by many at 6601 for his energy and engaging sermons and his presence at many interfaith events. And so, Rabbi.
Great, thank you. I thought I did it. So I have a tablet set up here to look at the whiteboards, but I can't figure out how to mute it. So I'm sorry if you're over here, you're going to hear a little bit of an echo, but only if you're paying really close attention. No, I'm not, because it shouldn't be. Hold on, let me just double check. But everyone online said they could hear me. No, yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, great. So thank you, everyone. I'm excited to be here. Before we even begin, please share with the community, and I'll have you, I'll repeat it for those online, but actually turn to someone near you and share what comes to mind when I say the word family. When I say the word family, F-A-M-I-L-Y, family. Turn to each other. And you can share in the chat box if you're online. What do you think of when you hear the word family? Would anyone, another moment to share with each other. Would anyone like to share? What did you come up with? What comes to mind when you think of family? Caring and love. People, okay. It's a first. This is not, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. This is not a Rorschach test. Father, okay. Community. Okay, so a lot of people, but also the feelings with people. What was it? Unique. I like that. Oh, unit. Yeah, okay, I like all of these. So now, and we won't turn to partners for this one, but just what do you think of when you hear the word covenant? Covenant. I know that Covenant Hall is great. Don't say Covenant Hall. Covenant Hall is great for singing, and there's a lot of reverberation when it comes to speaking. And so I know it's sometimes hard to hear in this space. What do you think of when you hear covenant? Maybe it is Covenant Hall. Promise. Relationship. Sacred agreement. I like that. Contract, but I like how, like sometimes it's contract, but Terry, you're a lawyer, you could have said contract. Sacred contract between the two of you. Yeah, that's great. The ketubah, which is a Jewish wedding contract or wedding covenant. Commitment. Prayer.
Forgive me, but I think of Judaism because that's the context in which I was exposed to that word.
That's fair, yeah. There's definitely like certain words, right? I know for me, when I hear the word ministry, makes me think of Christianity, right? Covenant Judaism, that's great. Okay, another one. How about law? L-A-W, law. Jail. I'm glad no, that's good, right? This idea of punishment, right? Law or else. What else do you think of when you hear law? Rules. Right and wrong. Edward.
Thinking of Jewish law, I automatically think of interpretations and elaborations.
Okay.
Which has gone on for so long.
Interpretations, elaborations, that's great. Let's do a couple more. How about, and this is a phrase, not a word, repair the world. What do you think of when you hear repair the world? Repair the world. Much to do. Much to do. If it would help, you can do I can put that here if you want. But repair the world, so much to do. The environment, obligation. Diane. Shared responsibility, problems. Let's do one more. Maybe this is a bad idea. Rabbi. Beard. Don't tell my wife that. If we don't know, my wife is also a rabbi. Educator. Teacher. Leader. This is great for my ego. Keep it coming. Thank you, everyone. No, we're going to pause there. So let me introduce. So we already had an introduction, but if you walked in late, I'm Rabbi Eric. I also tend to run late, so we're okay. Here's what we're going to do today. Introduction to Judaism in 90 minutes. How do you do that? It took me forever just to figure out that idea. So we're going to cover a lot. We're going to cover nothing at all, right? I don't know. Unfortunately, we had high holiday choir rehearsals during the last session, but I don't know how Dean did it. So I'm going to try to cover what I can. This is partial lecture, partial text study with a Q&A at the end. So we're going to look at some texts. We're going to look at a timeline of Jewish history, and then we'll have some time for questions. But the way I'm thinking about it is we're going to look at breadth, the timeline of Jewish history, with some depth here and there of texts to support that breadth. And my thesis for this whole presentation is that the Jewish people are a people who retell our story, so we look to the past, to live a life of mitzvot, of commandments, the present, in order to repair the world, tikkun olam, the future. So I'll say that again. If you take anything away from today, I believe that Jews are a people who retell our story to live a life of commandments, mitzvot, to effect tikkun olam. So as we jump in, and who knows if I'll get to them, this whiteboard right now, and if you're online, maybe you can see it on one of the windows I have up. What are some of the questions you have about Judaism, Jewishness, Jews, rabbis, Torah, anything? And I'll write them down for now. Maybe we'll address them. David.
Why do we retell our story?
Why do we retell our story? Great. Others.
What you said
So how is my thesis different from Christianity? How's my thesis? Huh? Okay. I have a shorthand when I take notes, J, C, and I. I don't know if other clergy people in other faiths do that, but Christianity is a C, and Islam is an I, and Judaism is a J.
But I don't understand it. I know some of the what I'm saying, but I don't understand why everyone wants to be against Jews, forever. I don't.
Right. Okay.
Even the reasons they say don't make sense to me.
Why anti-Semitism? I used a hyphen, but yeah. I like it, yeah.
Do they all embody on these?
Oh, that's an easy one, no. But we will get there, so.
It sounds pretty good on paper too.
I think that there are many who would say, to my thesis anyway, many would say yes, or a yes and then they'd fill in, well, here's how I would change it. But I think many would agree with at least the thesis. But there's a common saying, oh, what do Jews say about blank? And there's never one answer. Even, I think, the idea, well, how many gods are there? Okay, one. But what does that God look like? Is God separate from humanity, all in the same, pantheism or panentheism? No one answer. A couple others. Mostly my congregation are asking, this is great.
Why aren't we just a religion instead of a religion and a people?
So sorry, say it again.
Well, Christians can be any culture. Why are we considered a people and a religion?
Right.
Could you repeat that, Rabbi?
Yes, the question is, why are we a people and a religion? So why are we a people and a religion? Yeah.
I'm not sure this is a relevant answer, but the thing that I've been wondering about,
Please.
what's the difference between being a Jew and being a Zionist?
Yes, okay. So Jew versus Zionist. Question mark. Adding the question mark to understand that's a question and not Jew versus Zionist. Great, and I'll admit, maybe I should have, but Zionism going to be a very small part of actually our conversation. Yeah. Please.
Judaism, like Prophet Moses, and after that. For the Christianity, Prophet Jesus Christ, and after that. And for Islam, actually, they believe all the prophets, including Prophet Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
So, how actually you feel all these three prophets?
Sure. Okay, so let's say Judaism and I'm going to call them later prophets. Okay. If other questions come up, we will have a Q&A. Yeah, the question was basically, how does Judaism view Jesus and Muhammad, basically? But the prophets, and I put it in quotes because of context, not because of belief, these prophets that are later than Judaism, how does Judaism view them? Great. I think I practiced for one of these questions. And yeah, I don't even know if you can see them on the whiteboard, so apologize for those online, but we will get to them. So just to repeat our questions, why do we retell our story? How is my thesis different from Christianity and Islam? Why is there anti-Semitism? Do all flavors of Judaism agree? Or maybe the question is like, how are they similar and how are they different? Why are we a people and a religion? What does it mean to be a Jew? What does it mean to be a Zionist? And then how does Judaism view later prophets? Before we get to any of that, we are a people of the book, some will say. And what would a Jewish class be without texts? So I'm going to ask, we're going to look at source 1. I gave you the context. I don't usually do this, but Rabbi Rachel Timoner, she is a Reform rabbi. Oh, She's a Reform rabbi. She's the senior rabbi at Congregation Beth Elohim in Brooklyn. She cites Tal Becker, who's a vice president of the Shalom Hartman Institute. He's a lawyer and an educator. And I use this. I think it's a good summary. It captures a lot of what we're talking about. Can someone read source one? And I'm going to give you the mic so those online can hear. Michelle, thank you.
Any way you look at it, the Jewish people has a unique vocation among all nations. This does not make us superior, it only makes us singular. The same can be said of every other tribe and nation on earth. No other people shares our ancestry, our history, our Torah, our culture, our traditions, or our obligation. You do not have to believe in God or Torah to believe in the unique vocation of the Jews. You only have to believe in history, whether because, as the Torah teaches, God lifted us out of slavery in order to form an eternal covenant with our people, or because we witnessed, perished in, and survived the Holocaust, or because of a myriad of other defining moments in our history, the Jewish people is unlike any other, and we have a specific job to do. Continue? We are here to remind the human race that the world we live in is not good enough, that human dignity, justice, and peace are possible on earth, and that we are needed to transform the world that is into the world that should be. As Tal Becker of the Shalom Institute wrote, the biblical imperative of being a kingdom of priests and a holy people, Exodus 19:6, compels you not only to ask, how can I be better tomorrow than I was today, but also to believe that constant improvement is possible. The prophets describe a messianic age when there will be dignity for the poor and justice for the oppressed, an end to all war among nations, harmony with nature, and an utter lack of fear. I believe that human beings are capable of continual improvement and that the messianic age will be its result. If that day is guaranteed through God's will, we are needed as God's partners to make it real. If that is not guaranteed by God, well then, it depends on us. Either way, I agree with Franz Kafka, who wrote, the Messiah will come only when he is no longer necessary. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. And before we dig in, I just want to add that someone online asked, I'm going to move this, someone online asked a question too, which is, to whom do we tell our story? So we asked, why do we tell our story? And we'll tack on, to whom do we tell our story? But looking back now at Rabbi Rachel Timoner, what, she in some ways encapsulates what it means to be a Jew. And I think if you ask 20 rabbis to encapsulate what it means to be a Jew, you'd get, 40 answers, right? So, but in this case, what does it mean to be a Jew according to Rabbi Timoner?
Can I raise a doubt on this?
You can raise a doubt.
I like the piece altogether, but in the last line of the first paragraph, where he says no other people shares our ancestry, our history, that's true, our Torah, that's wrong. Because the Hebrew Bible is the Old Testament for Christians.
Sure.
And the Quran tells a whole lot of stories from the Hebrew Bible.
Yes, so,
I think he's stretched it on that one.
well, there are multiple interpretations of the word Torah. We could refer to the sacred Torah scroll, which we have in our ark up here, the 5 books of Moses. It could refer to any version of those 5 books that you can find in any Torah. But Torah can also mean the Bible, the Hebrew Bible. Torah can also mean the oral Torah, which is what the rabbis basically inherited and added on to the Torah. And so often when we say Torah, we mean all of it, the whole Jewish canon, or any of those versions. And I think it's still safe to say that if you were to take our Hebrew Bible and the Christian Old Testament and look at them with commentary, even some translations, they'd be different. And I think that still says, okay, this is ours and that's theirs, even if they're shared, especially in the space. So yeah, if you're saying, oh, the 5 books of Moses are ours only, you're absolutely right. If you're saying the Torah with all that comes with it in Judaism, that's ours. And I think that's what she's saying.
It makes a difference that it says our Torah.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's right, like, we're going to interpret things differently than like, I mean, no Jew will interpret it the same, and yeah. David?
I think that we as Jews are here to make the world a better place. That's, to me, the key.
Yeah.
Make the world a better place, and each of us is responsible to make ourselves a better person. And if we all make ourselves a better person, the world will be a better place.
So I like that. And again, and what I like about what she adds to it, right, is she's saying it makes a singular, but that can be true of everyone, right? There's this idea in Judaism of chosenness, the chosen people. Is it chosen as in better than, or chosen as in unique? I have 3 kids. I'm going to ask them to do things differently, not because one is better, but because they have different skills. Ezra's 5. He's starting to read and write. I can't ask Ami, who's 7 months, to do that, right? So I think that's how I look at it. But yeah, this is our calling, right? And Christians, Muslims, everyone they have theirs and they're going to word it differently. What else does this say about being Jewish or what it means to be a Jew? And you can share in the chat box online. I'm going to try to monitor it. It's a lot harder in person than online, but I'm going to try. Yeah, Lori.
In simple terms, I think it's that we all have, we have a shared history. We got to this point through the same path of trials and suffering and tribulations. And so that's something that when I meet other Jewish people, no matter where in the world they are, I am, I feel that historical connection with them.
Yeah. And I think it also, she addresses it, you bring it up, and it actually answers your question, Helen, about why are we a people and a religion, right? She says in the where does she say it? In the 2nd paragraph, you do not have to believe in God or Torah to believe in the unique vocation of the Jews. There are plenty of atheist Jews, or cultural Jews, or secular Jews, or what have you, and they're still, they felt it, they feel it in their kishkas, as we would say in Yiddish. They feel it in their gut, in their soul, when they meet another Jew. If you're in the middle of Montana, where there's not that many Jews, and you happen to hear someone say l'chaim as they clink their glass, you're going to look over and be like, another Jew in Montana? And I know there are Jews in Montana, just not that many as here. And there's something there, even if you're the person who says, I'm never going to go to synagogue, I don't believe in God, bacon-wrapped oyster, whatever they are, I don't eat them, scallops, thank you, right? That's, you can eat all that, but still you feel something. And I think that's something about it that, like, you can be an atheist Jew who doesn't do any of that, and you still feel like a Jew. There are, of course, exceptions, but they're the outliers, not the mainstream. Sorry, Jim, and then Shakir.
Yeah, it's kind of in response to Craig's question about why is there anti-Semitism. I would say Jews don't want to take over the world, but Jews do want to improve the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yeah, I don't know if is that cause of anti-Semitism. I don't think so, but I mean, there is something there. But I mean, I would not say it's a root cause, but now we do see it, right, in the right, the tree of, or like the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh happened in part because that synagogue was inviting in Hayas, which has to do with immigration, and so like that guy, that right-wing Christian nationalist extremist saw that connection. But yeah, I could see it being warped. Yes, tikkun olam does not mean taking over the world. If it did, there'd be a lot less violence, I think, right? Like, we'd be in a better spot.
So, let's say by the definition of what actually religion in the Torah, so can you define as a Jew? Because, by definition of the Torah, what is the definition of the Torah?
What is the definition of a Jew? I cannot do that. I think hopefully by the end of this, we can have a better sense of why I can't. I will say that traditionally, you are a Jew if you have a Jewish mother. Reform and some other non-liberal denominations will also accept father. So if your mother is Jewish or you convert, that makes you a Jew. If you convert out, depends. right? If someone said, I'm leaving Judaism, I'm going to convert to anything else, but then they come back, everyone would say, okay, so that was a blip, you're welcome back. So that's traditionally, but it's not from the Torah. So that's why I can't answer that question. A couple last thoughts, yeah. The conversion process is essentially you study for a while with a rabbi. You sit in front of a Beit Din, it's called a rabbinic court, usually 3 rabbis or other Jewish professionals, cantors, or maybe an educator. And they ask you some questions. The way I do it, they're always open-ended questions, like, what does Shabbat mean to you? And not, name 7 commandments. We don't do that. And then once you do that, you go through the mikvah, which is a ritual bath, and then you come out and you're a Jew, and that's it. And once you convert, you're a Jew. There's no converted Jew, or like there's no real, you are a convert, but no one says, oh, are you a bloodline Jew or a converted? You're just a Jew. People don't know, the real world is not everyone's treated that way, but that is how it's supposed to be. Okay, so a couple of things I want to lift up from this. First, the idea of, so you ask, are we a religion, a people? I call us a religio-ethno-people culture, because it's all of the above and none of the above. There are white Jews, black Jews, right? Jews who are white, Jews of color, everything in between. There's Eastern European ancestry, there's Sephardic, Spanish ancestry, there's all of that. We are a people, we're a religion, we're a culture. I would say an ethnicity, but not a race. I think most people generally, often scholars would say that. We talk about that. This text lifts up 3 core ideas to Judaism, what we call sometimes the 3-legged stool of Judaism: God, Torah, and Israel. The way one of my colleagues puts it is that you don't need all 3. A stool will be very wobbly with only 2, but it's okay. So if you have Torah and Israel, that's fine. And by Israel, we mean the Jewish people. God, Torah, Israel. Israel means the Jewish people. Almost always when I'm talking about Israel, that's what I mean. And we'll get to why. So God, Torah, Israel, we believe in God, we study and live by the Torah, and we have connection with our people. We also see here this idea of we were slaves, and then we entered into a covenant with God. So let's look at the history. Now, this is the way I learn best. Let me see the big picture and then I can fill in the gaps. So that's how I'm going to teach it. Maybe you're the type of person who really likes primary sources and then you get the big picture from that. This will be a little less of that, and I apologize. Just the nature of an hour and a half's worth of time means that we're going to be mostly sort of helicopter bird's eye view, but that's not the right, but the zoomed out view. And when we can, we will zoom in. I will try to, someone asked to repeat the question. I don't remember what the question was, so I will try to do better at that though, Nancy, I apologize. So I have handed out in person, and I've also shared online, and I will reshare online, 2 handouts. One of them, the black and white one, has texts. The second one has 2 images, and on it you can see my beautiful Microsoft Paint timeline that I made, that I will also try to fill in over here, recognizing that, well, maybe you'll be able to see it, but even if you can't online, or even if you're sitting in the back row, you have it here in front of you as well. I'm going to first just punctuate a few kind of key points that it's helpful to know. That in the very beginning, we say, God created the world. I'm not even going to put a year. We just have the beginning. And then we can divide it. I like to divide it into 3 big chunks of time. We have the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, also called the Tanakh, which is an acronym, Tanakh, which means Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. Tanakh, that's the Hebrew Bible. Then we have the rabbis, and there are still rabbis today, at least I hope. And then we have modernity. It's not at all to scale. And a couple of key dates that are really important to know, and again, we'll then dive in. After God created the world, God tried a couple of times to have humanity work out. Judaism says it didn't quite work out. So then we have Oh, there's no way I can do color coding for all this. Okay. Then we have Abraham. Good old Abe and Sarah. Some people say would be about 1800 BCE. I'm going to say BCE instead of BC. CE is the common era. That's what from 0 or 1 on. BCE is before the common era. This way, we don't say before Christ or whatever the Latin is. I don't remember. So we say BCE and CE. You may have heard that sometimes in academic circles, perhaps in Islam too. I'm not sure. You have that as well. This echo. So Abe is 1800. Helpful to know that, let's see, Moses was about 1200, so they say, and these are all approximate. BCE. We're going to skip ahead to, so there was a temple that was built after him. That was first destroyed in 586 BCE. They rebuilt it later, 70 CE. The second one was destroyed. I'm going to say 500 is this thing called the Talmud. It's 500 CE. We're going to skip all the way ahead to, let's say, 1800 with modernity. Now I say all this because I spelled modernity wrong. There we go, close enough. Because the Bible is basically everything up through the destruction of that first temple. Then the rabbis who came after the rebuilding of that second temple, but I'm just going to lump them together, they existed until, I'm going to call this era until modernity. And the modernity happened with things like Napoleon and Enlightenment and all of that. So let's dig in a little bit. In the beginning, our Torah says, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. God created the world in 7 days, right? 6 days of creation, resting on the seventh. This is not on your text yet. Perhaps you know this from the Old Testament. Maybe there's a similar version in the Quran, I'm not sure. But our Torah says God created the world in 6 days and then created 2 human beings, Adam and Eve, from whom everyone else came. It didn't work out for those first couple of humans. Immediately, one son killed the other. Cain killed Abel. The generations went corrupt, so God said, I'm going to try again. I'm going to wipe out the earth, and Noah, you get to start it all over again. And so we have the famous story of Noah's Ark. You may have seen, what's the movie? Evan Almighty. Never mind, it's a movie. But we have Noah and his ark. Again, let's try to recreate humanity. Noah immediately gets drunk. So 10 more generations go by, and God says, you know what? Instead of having all of humanity be the best, let's have one people show the world what to do. Let's have one family. Now again, as Rabbi Timoner said, this is our story. We're not actually saying we are the best and our family is better than all the rest, but that's what the story says. And so we're going to look at source 2 here. So God picks Abraham and Sarah, again, about 1800 BCE. We're 12 chapters into Genesis, so not that far. And God picks Abraham and Sarah and says, you are going to be special to me. You are going to have a covenant with me, you and your ancestors. Can someone read, I bolded it, but then I cut the paragraph I didn't bold. Can someone read source 2 for us, nice and loud, or actually into the mic? Great, thank you. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Ben. Oh, and before you do that, this comes from Rabbi Harold Kushner. He was a conservative American rabbi. He was an author. He was a lecturer. And you may have heard of or even read his famous book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Anyway, if you can read this.
Judaism begins not with an idea, but with a community. The great-great-grandchildren of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, going through the experience of Egyptian slavery and miraculous liberation from slavery. Out of that shared experience and the subsequent encounter with God and Mount Sinai, we shape the religion, holy days, and rituals to celebrate the formative events of our history, prayers and scriptures to spell out how we understand our relationship to God. But through it all, it is the participation in the community that defines us as Jews. The creeds and rituals are secondary.
Thank you. Now going back to what you were asking and what others said, other people would say, what do you mean that creeds and rituals are secondary, right? But this is his version. But I think many would agree that it comes down to one family, and we're all the descendants of that one family. That's the idea. And in fact, they say, if you convert to Judaism, so all Jews, or in theory, have a Hebrew name or a Jewish name. And it's usually your first name, your middle name in Hebrew or Yiddish or Ladino. But you have your names, son or daughter of your parents' names. If you convert and your parents aren't Jewish, traditionally you take on the names Abraham and Sarah. That you are, my name is Elkanah Leib, so if I were to convert, I would say Elkanah Leib ben, son of Abraham and Sarah, son of Abraham and Sarah, because I am a descendant of, some people like to say they're the first Jews. I don't know, is there in Islam, do we say they're the first Muslims? Is that yeah. So, they're already, right? There's a difference. But also, they're not really Jewish yet anyway. There's no Judaism. There's no word Jew at this point in the Bible. That's the thing that's killing me. But the idea is that one family, it starts with Abraham and Sarah. They have 2 kids. Ishmael goes off, does his own thing, and Isaac. Isaac marries Rebekah. They have 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. Esau does his own thing. Jacob, 12 sons and 1 daughter, but the 12 sons become the 12 tribes of Israel because Jacob wrestles with God, changes his name. He gets his name changed to Yisrael, which literally means wrestles with God. And that's where we come from, because everyone comes from one of his 12 sons. And so that's what the name Yisrael means. It is, we are the people, the children of Yisrael, meaning we are all descended from this one guy, Jacob, who went by Israel. And so here we have a family, Abraham and his descendants, culminating in 12 sons who become 12 tribes. And the other key thing we get from this is that Abraham forms a relationship with God, the one God, the only God. That's the idea, is that there's a story, a later story that says Abraham's father owned an idol shop, all these statues and idols, and people would come and buy these. Do you have the story too? That's so cool. So the story goes that Abraham, his father sold all these idols, and one day Abraham took a hammer or stick and smashed every idol but one, and he put the stick in that one idol's hand, and his father came in angry. What is this, Abraham? What happened? He says, I didn't do it, the idol did it. And he's like, idols can't do that. And Abraham's like, well, then why do you pray to them, right? And the idea being, okay, it's not the idols, it's one God. And that relationship starts here. It begins with a covenant with Abraham and his descendants. But then those descendants, his great-grandchildren, the 12 tribes and their families, they go down to Egypt because there's a famine, and they become enslaved. And 400 years later, God redeems that entire people from slavery. We have the whole Passover story. Moses gets chosen. He sees the burning bush. He talks with God. God sends him. We're now at about 1200 BCE. God sends Moses to Pharaoh. Let my people go and all that. 10 plagues later, Pharaoh lets them go. They cross the sea, right? The sea splits. Moses goes through, and the whole people go through. The waves crash in on the Egyptians, and they're free. I'm going to read this one, the bold part of source 3. We're in the book of Exodus. So this is the second book of the Torah, or of the Bible. Towards the bottom, the bold. The water had crashed in on the Egyptians, and it says, but the Israelites had marched through the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. Thus the Eternal, that's what we call God for an egalitarian way, the Eternal. Thus the Eternal delivered Israel that day from the Egyptians. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore of the sea. And when Israel saw the wondrous power which the Eternal had wielded against the Egyptians, the people feared the Eternal. They had faith in the Eternal and in God's servant Moses. There we go. Finally, after 400 years of slavery, the Egyptians are free. By the way, at least in my own head, whenever I think of the Egyptians, they are this this ancient, unrelated to modern times Egyptians. Actually, my best friend is married to I guess she's Coptic Egyptian Christian, and she's come to our Passover Seders. And the first time we got to this part, my best friend was like, "Smite the Egyptian," to his wife. And it was very funny. He could joke around because he's married to her, but we're like, oh my God, that's not what it means now. And I think that's very important to recognize. I mean, she's a good friend, and like, there's nothing there about modern Egyptians. And in fact, we don't even know if this 100% happened. So it's all part of our story. So the Israelites left Egypt. After that, they sang, they danced. This is where the song Micha Mocha comes from. And then they wandered for a bit, and then they get to Sinai. Can someone read? This is an excerpt from Exodus 19 and 20. Can someone read the bold parts of source 4? This is after the Israelites have left Egypt. They've started their journey, and then they arrive at Mount Sinai. Great, thank you. Just the bold parts. Yeah. I always provide Hebrew in case anyone asks a question about it, or if you yourself speak Hebrew, but no, just the English, please.
On the third new moon after the Israelites had gone forth from land of Egypt, on that very day they entered the wilderness of Sinai. Having journeyed from Rephidim, they entered the wilderness of Sinai and encamped in the wilderness. Israel encamped there in front of the mountain, and Moses went up to God. The Eternal called to him from the mountain, saying, "Thus shall you say to the house of Jacob and declare to the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Now then, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples. Indeed, all the earth is mine, but you shall be to me the kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel."
Great, thank you. And then if you can skip, so we get a little, just skip to the next bold part, please. So God, there's more things happen, and then God speaks these words.
God spoke all these words, saying, "I am the Eternal, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods besides me."
Great, thank you. And that's the beginning. Anyone know what that's the beginning of? You might know it in a slightly different translation. It's the Ten Commandments. Fun fact is that Judaism, Catholicism, and Protestantism, and maybe it depends on which denomination, all number them differently. They're all 10 are there, but which one's 1 and 2, etc., differs amongst the faiths. But only if you're like writing them down of like, this is number 1, this is number 2. If you were just to list them all, it would be the same. So we get to Mount Sinai, and this is the third. There are 3 big moments people say. There's creation, there's redemption, and there's revelation. We had creation in the beginning of the world, or you could say the creation of the Jewish people, but then we get to Moses redeeming God redeeming the people, and then they get to Sinai and they get the law. How many commandments are there? Does anyone know? There are 613 commandments is what our tradition says, because here we get 10 of them. I am the Eternal, your God. Judaism counts that as 1. You have no other gods besides me. Don't make a sculptured image. Observe Shabbat. Don't murder. Don't steal. But then we get all sorts of others. We get some immediately after the 10 Commandments. We get some throughout the books of Numbers and Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. In the Torah, we get 613 commandments. Now, people have tried to break them down, and everyone has different ways of numbering them. It doesn't say this is number 1, this is number 2. And so Moses, they go to Sinai, they get the commandments, they build the tabernacle, which is the portable ark. They wander for 40 years, and at the end of Deuteronomy, 40 years after the Exodus, Moses dies, and they're about to enter the promised land. And that is the end of the Torah. So the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, is divided into 3 parts. Part 1 is the Torah. That is the most sacred part of the Bible, the Torah. It is what we house in our sacred scroll in there. It is what we read every year. We start at the beginning, we read the whole thing, and then we restart it. So we're reading and rereading and rereading the whole Torah every year. I think the best equivalent, and I can only say for Christianity, I think it's the equivalent of the Gospels. My understanding is the Gospels tend to have a higher level of holiness or whatever it is compared to the rest. I see some nods, so I think it's kind of like that. That would be a decent analogy. Where the whole Hebrew Bible is, the Torah, the Tanakh is sacred, but the Torah is especially sacred. I'm going to do some highlights now for this part. The Israelites get to the Promised Land. Joshua leads them in. They conquer it. They take it over, whatever it is you want to say. Joshua leads the people, then judges, a series of singular tribal leaders lead the Israelites in the Promised Land until around the year 1000. We get King David. First we get this is BCE. We have David, the first real Jewish king. Saul is first, but no one likes him. He gets kicked out. David becomes the king. His son Solomon becomes the king after him. And then, and I'm going to use a little map here. Let's see. I'm going to draw a very rough sketch of, this is modern day Israel, more or less. Let's just call that Israel for the sake of right now. We can see it, right? Well, that looks close enough. So we have Israel, one united kingdom, which at the time looked nothing like what the modern state of Israel looks like, because really this wasn't part of it. It went over here. It changes depending on who's king and who they conquer and what land they give up, whatever. But the point is, under David, we had one whole kingdom. It stays one whole kingdom under his son Solomon. And then under Solomon, in about 930, it splits in half. Kingdom of Israel in the north, which is actually bigger. We'll say that. Israel in the north, Judah in the south. Why are they called that? Israel, because the whole people. Judah, because Judah is the biggest of the 12 tribes. Now, what does the word Judah sound like? You can say it. Jew. That eventually, not even at this point, but within the next 1,000 years, that's where the word Jew comes from the tribe of Judah, which was the southern kingdom, was named after the tribe of Judah, and that's where the term Jew comes from. Judaism. This northern kingdom was conquered by the Assyrians in 722 BCE, Assyria, and those 10 of the 12 tribes were lost forever. People always say, oh, we're one of the lost 10 tribes. I don't know if I believe it. 722, 586, the southern kingdom of Judah was conquered. Jerusalem was conquered. The temple was destroyed. Now, what is the temple? Back in the Torah and biblical times, the best way to worship God was to bring animal or other sacrifices. And by other, I mean like breads and fruit and things like that. And eventually it was all sort of centralized in theory in Jerusalem, and you had one temple. And that was destroyed in 586. And that was by the Babylonians. Thankfully, about 50 years later, what's his name? Cyrus the Great, maybe? Cyrus the something. He, Persian? Came and he it's been a while since I've done this sort of history class. He came and he let the Jews back in. He let them rebuild the temple. And so that's in 516, I think is when it was built, the second temple. And around that time, a little afterwards, is when that's the end of the Bible. Daniel, I think, is the last thing that happens in the Bible. Daniel, it's weird. Jews don't study Daniel that much. Daniel took on a much more important role, in my understanding, in Christianity than in Judaism. I've studied it once, I think, in one class. But anyway, the point is that after Moses dies, we get the whole rest of the Hebrew Bible, made up of two parts. Nevi'im, the prophets, and Ketuvim, the writings. The prophets include both the major and minor prophets and what is it? You got Joshua, you got Judges, Kings, all of that. That's in the prophets, and then the writing Psalms and Proverbs and some of the other later historical books. I mean the Hebrew Bible, what some call the Old Testament. Yes, that is the end of the Old Testament. Yes, so in Judaism I try not to call it the Old Testament because that acknowledges a new testament, which does exist obviously, but it's not my testament. I'm not trying to say, oh, there's the newer one. So I like to say the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible, or the Christian New Testament. But I don't take offense whenever anyone does it. Please don't, this is just how I refer to it. That is the end of the Bible. That is the Hebrew Bible. That is the end of this first period, the Tanakh, the rebuilding of the Second Temple in 516 or so BCE. That's a BCE. BCE, not CE. Second Temple exists for about 500 years. Around that time, there are lots of changes. The Greeks come in. They ruin the temple. They don't fully destroy it, but they desecrate it. They say, you can't study that Torah. So the Jews spin their little dreidel. That's not a real story. That's what they say. But that happened in this time period. The Hanukkah story happened about 165 BCE. Also, not in the land of Israel, but out in Persia somewhere, the supposed story of Purim happened. And so those things, I guess that would be somewhere in here. That's also in the Bible. But eventually the Romans take over the land of Israel, as they take over many places. And you end up having two classes, two mainstream leadership styles in the land of Israel. You have the priests, called the Sadducees. And you have the Pharisees, who became the rabbis. And this is all happening around 0, let's say, plus or minus. I don't think that's a real year, but give or take 100 years. A bunch of people who are saying, we don't, we like the sacrifices, but what if we also studied the Torah? And yeah, you're going to go worship over there. We're also going to pray on the side. We're going to have our discussions, and we're going to maybe democratize Judaism a little bit. So as the priests were happening in the temple, you also had these guys, eventually called the rabbis. Now the rabbis were doing something radical, because that wasn't done before them. They were studying it, and they were writing it, and they were talking about it. And one could say, who are you to do this with the Torah? The Torah says, don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. Why aren't you mixing chicken? Why aren't you mixing chicken and milk? Chickens can't make milk, rabbis. That's silly. The Torah doesn't say that. And the rabbis were making up laws and stories and interpreting and reinterpreting. But they said they had the tradition. If you look at skipping source 5, source 6, this is from Pirkei Avot. It means the ethics of our fathers or the chapters of our ancestors. It's one of Edward Stern's favorite books, Pirkei Avot. And we get the very first writing. Now this comes from the Mishnah, which I'm going to get to, but this is one of the first earliest pieces of rabbinic writing. Can someone read whatever number I just said, source 6? You may. Just the bold part.
Moses received the Torah at Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the men of the great assembly. They said 3 things: be patient in the administration of justice, raise many disciples, and make a fence around the Torah.
Thank you. And so what we see here, well, what is this text doing? Let me give a little more context before we do that. So the rabbis, let's say they started existing around 100 BCE. And so they're writing and they're talking. Eventually, all those rabbis, their teachings, a lot of them got compiled in the year 200, and this is a big one, the year 200 CE, in what's called the Mishnah. And the Mishnah the Mishnah, basically the Torah has all these laws. And the rabbis were saying, well, how do you live these laws? It says don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. What does that mean? It says that you shouldn't work on Shabbat. What does work mean? Can we write? Can we read? Can we work at our jobs? What does all this mean? So they started elaborating on the laws, and they started writing them down, and they started telling stories, and that all got compiled in 200 into this thing called the Mishnah. It's not a code of law, it's more like the minutes of people who are trying to come up with a code of law, recording what everyone says. And this is a little bit less on the law, but what is this text telling about who the rabbis are, or who they think they are? Or let's say it this way, if you were a rabbi and you also had the priests over there and everyone was saying, my way is the right way, what is this text saying? In the second part, for sure. What's the first part saying?
It's like some kind of authority has been passed down.
Yeah. We got this directly from Moses, right? Moses passed it to Joshua, to the elders, to the prophets, blah, 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 and then we got it. So everything that we're saying here, we got from Moses. Even though, when you open the Torah, none of it's there. Well, some of it's there, but a lot of it isn't there. So the rabbis, these are called the Tanaim, but these are the early rabbis from about 100 BCE to 200 CE, and they're talking and they're arguing, and that's compiled in 200 in the Mishnah. At this time, 70 CE, the second temple is destroyed by the Romans. There's a whole war, Jerusalem is sacked and ransacked and destroyed, and the temple is destroyed, which means the priests are no longer the people to run the show. Well, fortunately for them, they're the rabbis. So as these rabbis are talking and arguing, their competition is destroyed, and there's fertile ground for them to step in and lead Judaism. And so they write the Mishnah with a couple, 100 years later, 130 years later. Their descendants then argue for another 300 years, and they're talking all about the Mishnah. And in 500 CE, they write the Talmud. Judaism, as we know it, is not so much Torah Judaism, it is Talmudic or Rabbinic Judaism. Because the Torah gives us all those question marks. How do we actually live a life? If you were to open the Torah and try to live it, it would be impossible. People try. I mean, it's doable, but it's really hard. And the rabbi said, okay, here's how we're going to do it. Right? The Torah says you shall live in booths for the holiday of Sukkot. Well, what kind of booth? How do you build it? They came up with rules. The Torah says nothing about how often you should pray. The rabbi said you need to pray 3 times a day, 4 times if it's Shabbat or holiday, 5 times if it's Yom Kippur. They came up with all these rules, always based on the Torah, sometimes very loosely so. And so we're now in this era of the rabbis. From, we're going to say, 100 BCE until modernity, which we're going to say 1800. And I want to look at an example from the Talmud. First, I'm going to show you, well, you can turn the page over. The second page of your printed one has a page of Talmud. And actually, I should have looked this ahead of time, but I can, in theory, find the page we're going to look at. 13b? Yeah. But here, and I'll walk around with it, this is a page of Talmud. This side. The right, someone did a translation. Now, the Talmud is written, the Mishnah is mainly in Hebrew. The Talmud, really, so what it is, I should say, that section from 200 to 500, the section between the Mishnah and the compilation of the Talmud, that's called the Gemara. So Mishnah plus Gemara is Talmud, but sometimes people say only that, like Talmud could mean that second half, or it means the whole thing. But basically, rabbis went and they commented, and this whole middle section right here is the Talmud. You might be talking about Mishnah and then Talmud, Gemara, Mishnah, Gemara, Mishnah, Gemara. And it's in Hebrew and Aramaic. Aramaic is another Semitic language that looks like Hebrew. It's the same letters, same roots, but it's spoken differently. A modern Hebrew speaker would probably be able to figure out Aramaic slowly and difficultly. Difficultly? Is that a word? That's not a word. But they would eventually figure it out. I think the best example, oh yes, the best example is, what do they speak in Barcelona? What's the Catalan? Probably that in Spanish is probably the best equivalent of Hebrew to Aramaic. Maybe, or somewhere between that and Portuguese and Spanish. The point is, same language, a lot of the same roots, root letters, root words, but just different, slightly different grammar, different definite articles, things like that. So we have the Talmud, and again, it's on the back page. The Talmud was written in 500 CE, or compiled in 500 CE, but then, of course, rabbis do what they do, and they talk about it, and they comment, and they comment, and they comment in different generations, and they have arguments with each other, and that's what all the writing around the center page is. So the center column is the Mishnah and Gemara, meaning the Mishnah and the Talmud. And then over here you have Rashi, an 11th century rabbi, commenting on it. Over here is, I have no idea who that is. I don't know, doesn't matter. Different rabbis from different times. This is Rabbeinu Hanan, I don't know who that is, some rabbi, never heard of him. And so just different rabbis commenting over time. Sometimes you'll see references to the Torah or to the rest of the Bible or to the rest of the Talmud. So that's all what this is. And this is a modern commentary. So the Talmud is how we live our lives today. Everything that is Jewish today is, the way I say it is the Talmud is the spine and brain, the nervous system of Judaism, and the Torah is the heart. Can't live without a heart, but it doesn't tell us what to do. The brain tells us what to do. That's the Talmud. If you have a question, it's going to be based more on the Talmud than in the Torah. A question about Judaism. Please.
Who became the rabbis? In other words, how did a person become a rabbi? Was it a school or something?
So there were schools of thought, houses, so like Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai were houses sort of, yeah. So it's, the origins of the rabbis aren't fully known as far as I know. Maybe since my time in school, some archaeologist found the answer, but I don't think so. They developed in this time of sectarian, like everyone's fighting with each other. The rabbis developed at the same time as Christianity. The early Christians were all Jews, right? They were the Jews who said we're going to follow him, and they're the Jews who said we're not going to follow him. But they were all in conversation with each other. Some people say that the Lord's Prayer and the Kaddish all come from the same milieu and look similar. I don't quite see it, but some people say it. So they're all, so you have the Pharisees, the Sadducees, you have the early Christians, you have the rabbis, you have the Dead Sea folks, the Essenes, you have the Zealots, everyone's there. If you've seen Life of Brian by Monty Python, actually a pretty good representation of what it was like back then, from my understanding. Taking the aliens with a grain of salt, that happens. But everything else. So who are they? They were just people who were learning together. The rabbi back then was not a profession. Some of them had other jobs. Some of them were poor because their other job didn't pay well. Some of them were wealthy because their other job did pay well. Some of them were wealthy enough that they could be rabbis, but they were just teachers, people arguing, people debating. And I think one of the fun things is they were all like, this is the way that Judaism is. And then there are lots of other people who are like, yeah, rabbis, whatever, until eventually it all coalesced as, oh yeah, okay, we're all going to follow the rabbis. So the rabbis, again, they developed at that time sort of an offshoot of, not an offshoot, but separate from the priesthood, because the priesthood was hereditary. And the rabbis, any male could be a rabbi. So Talmud happens 500 CE. We're going to look very briefly at a little sample of Talmud. I'm going to read this one because. So the priesthood was hereditary. Anyone could be a rabbi. So in that sense, any man could be a rabbi. So in that sense, it was more democratic. Let's say more democratic. It's not democracy as we know it today by any means, but the idea that anyone could access Torah and be part of this, again, anyone with a giant asterisk, versus the priests where you had to be of the priestly line. If If you weren't born to a priest, there's no way you could be a priest. Maybe I don't know enough about that there is a whole thing about priestly families. I don't know enough about it to be able to answer. Okay, so source 7 comes from the Talmud. Again, compiled in 500 CE, takes the Mishnah and the Gemara, puts it together. It's the backbone of Judaism. They're going to name some rabbis. The two you need to know are Hillel and Shammai. These were two either rabbis or schools of thought that were constantly fighting each other. Not fighting, they were constantly arguing with each other, but actually not really fighting. It even says that the sons married the daughters of each. There was a lot of respect there too. It was, I don't know what, it was who was McCain and who was the, McCain and, didn't McCain, wasn't there, John McCain had like a best friend across the aisle, didn't he? Or am I totally mixing? No, but they were on the same side. So maybe Scalia and Ginsburg, maybe. But not even that, but like, they were friendly, they were friends, that's the point. Okay, so Rabbi Abba said that Shmuel said, so that doesn't matter, we're just introducing that this comes from rabbis. For 3 years, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagreed. One would say, they said, the halacha, meaning law, is in accordance with our opinion, and these said, the halacha is in accordance with our opinion. The core of the Talmud is law. Do we do this or do we do that? That is what the rabbis are mainly arguing. Yes, there are lots of stories too, but they're talking about the law. The law doesn't even matter here. They're arguing about the law. Ultimately, a divine voice emerged and proclaimed, both these and these are the words of the living God, but the halacha, the law, is in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel. So they're arguing for 3 years. If we have meat dishes and dairy dishes, can we wash them in the same sink? Yes, no, going back and forth for 3 years, or anything, doesn't matter. Eventually a voice says, we're following Hillel. Now the Gemara, meaning the Talmud, asks, since both these and these are the words of the living God, why were Beit Hillel, meaning why were the students of Beit Hillel privileged to have the halacha established in their opinion? So it's saying, okay, if both of these are the words of the living God, why Hillel? And it says, the reason is that they were agreeable and forbearing, showing restraint when affronted, and they taught the halacha, they would teach both their own statements and the statements of Beit Shammai. Moreover, they formulated their teachings and cited a dispute and prioritized the statements of Beit Shammai to their own in deference to Beit Shammai. Basically what it's saying is that when they argued, they listened to the other side, they would present the other side's case, they weren't just saying, I'm right, you're wrong, they'd say, I understand you. Now here's where it gets interesting. In the Mishnah that we learned, in the case of one whose head and most of his body were in the sukkah is a temporary shelter for the holiday of Sukkot. You may have seen ours out there. Thank you to Jim and everyone who put it up and down. So if in the case of one whose head and most of their body is in the sukkah, but the table was in the house, meaning outside of the sukkah, Beit Shammai deems this sukkah invalid, Beit Hillel deems it valid. So before we dig in, what does this show us about the Talmud? Like, what does this tell you about who the rabbis were and what they were doing? And I've already kind of said it, but I want to hear from you. Like, what is going on here? They're trying to get along. They're trying to figure it out. The Torah says you're to set up these temporary booths. What does that mean? They have a whole section on how tall, how wide, how many walls. And now they're arguing about, well, what if the sukkah is here, if I'm in the sukkah and I'm eating my meal, because you're supposed to eat the meal in the sukkah. If I'm eating my meal right here, but the table is outside the sukkah, does it count? That's what they're arguing about. And Shammai says it doesn't count, and Hillel says it does count, right? And what does the Talmud say before that? Who do we follow? Who does in the 2 paragraphs before, what does it say? We follow Hillel, okay. Put a pin in that for a moment, because once the Talmud is compiled in 500 CE, there are actually 2 Talmuds. This one comes from Babylonia. There's another one from the land of Israel, often called the Palestinian Talmud. But that one, because it was also called the land of Palestine, that one is not as important. The Babylonian one is the important one, and that just has to do with the geopolitics of as the Persian Empire became more important, and then as the I forget which dynasty, but the Arab conquests happened, Babylonia became more important than what was in the land of Israel. But basically, once the Talmud is settled, everything at that point is now, well, how do we live our lives based on the Talmud? And you had Jews who lived in Babylonia. A lot of them made their way into Europe. Some lived in Eastern Europe or Germany and France. Some lived in Spain. When that was conquered by the Arab conquests, they moved to places like Egypt. What we have during this time period, and I'm making a huge jump from 500 to 1800, two things. We have the development of different Jewish cultures, the main two being Ashkenazi and Sephardi. Ashkenazi being French and German and then Eastern Europe, and Sephardi being Spanish, but then also the Middle East the Middle East. So we have two different cultures, two different rites that all see each other as equally Jewish, you just do things differently. The best example that I can come up with on the spot, in Passover, you're not supposed to eat what's called chametz, which is bread or bread-like things. So no bread, no pasta, nothing that can make bread. Well, what about cornmeal or rice? When ground up, they look like bread. So the Ashkenazim, the ones from Eastern Europe, say, and France and Germany, say you can't eat it on Passover. And the ones from Spain and the Middle East say you can. But they're all still praying together. It's just if you go to one's house, they might have rice and the other might not. The other thing that's happening here is just more development of Jewish law. The Talmud, as we see here, often lists debate without an answer. And so the rabbis are trying to say, well, do we follow it, do we not? Do we follow Hillel or do we follow Shammai? The thing right before it says we follow Hillel, but then the actual piece just says they were still debating. So what do we do? And so you have codes and codes and codes of law. And here's one of my favorite ones. Well, this is, my favorite section. So source 8, the Shulchan Aruch, which came to be in 1563, is the most well-known or most cited code of Jewish law. During this time, lots of rabbis said, the Talmud is just debate. We want a law code. Do we do X or Y? Don't say, well, some do X and some do Y. Just tell us what to do. So this is Joseph Caro, Rabbi Joseph Caro. It's long, it's a huge code of law. And he's trying to tell you, okay, well, when we have 3 rabbis, we're gonna take the majority opinion and you're gonna do this. Or when we have 5 rabbis, right? He's trying to figure out what do we do. And here's the best part. One whose head and most of his body is inside the sukkah, and his table is outside and the sukkah, and he eats it. He eats as if, whatever it says, there's a prohibition against this. Go back to the Talmud. Whose opinion is he citing? Go back to source 7. He's citing Shammai. So after that whole thing in the Talmud that says, we follow the words of Hillel because he showed deference and he was kind and blah, blah, blah. 1,000 years later, they sided with Shammai. I just love it because A, it shows that not everything in the Talmud, it wasn't set in stone. And I'm sure there are other rabbis who would say it is valid. Finally, we get to modernity. We're gonna run out of time for the Q&A. So up until 1800, we had different rites, R-I-T-E-S. You had different, some Jews did it this way, some did it that way, but they all followed Jewish law. Or they were on the fringes of the community. They're always the people who are right, who say, yes, I'm an Orthodox Jew, or I follow all the law, and then they sneak, bite on Yom Kippur when they're supposed to be fasting. That's true for every religion, right? That's true for everyone. But let's talk about the religious ones. Everyone was just Jewish. And then we had modernity. And in modernity, lots happened. And we're talking mainly this is happening in Western Europe. You had Napoleon come in and free all the Jews in the lands he conquered. And then they sort of reverted back. But then you had Germany, which was a seat of enlightenment and whatever happened after that, Romanticism and all those things. And in the early 1800s, in Western Europe, at different places, the Jews started becoming emancipated. Before that, they were living in ghettos. They lived in their own world, in their own little communities. But John Locke, all these people who say, you know what, everyone gets to be a citizen. Suddenly the Jews are citizens, and they're responding to modernity in different ways. Now, we're going to look at a couple of texts here that are going to stretch from 1800 until, I'd say, only a couple of decades ago. We're now in the third section, which is modernity. You can be an individual. You choose what you want to do. You have rights and privileges. You can vote. You can do all these different things. So what do? We can now, women can wear pants. What do we do with this newfound gift of all these things? Well, first, source 9, we have the Reform response. So the Reform movement started happening in the early 1800s saying, hey, we want to be like everyone else. Let's start, the Protestants, they have an organ. Let's have an organ in our service. They're preaching in German. Why don't we preach in German too instead of Yiddish? And so these early Reform groups just started tweaking here and there. People liked it. They would tweak more. They would tweak more until we get to this statement of principles in 1885. This is in America now. We recognize in the Mosaic legislation a system of training the Jewish people for its mission during its national life in Palestine. And today we accept as binding only its moral laws and maintain only such ceremonies as elevate and sanctify our lives, but reject all such as are not adapted to the views and habits of modern civilization. Can someone put that in their own words? We're going to become not just Reformed Jews, we're going to be like everyone else. The moral laws, don't murder, don't steal, those are still real. Kosher, that doesn't elevate our lives. Go eat a bacon cheeseburger. A yarmulke, the Christians around us aren't wearing yarmulkes. We're not going to wear those. So Reform, that was one. Now that's a far response. They have since gone back to a little more tradition. Source 10 is an Orthodox view. He says in the bold, the people of Israel have always followed the law, the oral law, meaning the Talmud in addition to the Torah, which gave and will continue to give their religion a new and increasingly life-preserving spirit. The wearing of tzitzit, meaning the fringes you see, the laying of phylacteries or tefillin, the observance of Shabbat, etc. The hope for future redemption, these are what have renewed and will always renew at every time, on every occasion, the spirit of life within our nation. So Reform said, we're going to embrace modernity, and we're going to be like everyone else. Orthodoxy said, the law is the law, we have to keep it. Modern Orthodoxy said, the law is the law, but we're still going to live our lives, and so anytime you see a doctor with a yarmulke, they're probably modern Orthodox, because they're saying, I can still be a Jew and modern, but I'm going to keep the law. I'm going to work 6 days a week, and then I'll rest on Shabbat. Source 11, which is the basis of conservative Judaism, says, it affirms, this new conservative Judaism affirms both the divine value and historical basis of Judaism, and therefore believes that by introducing some changes, it may achieve some agreement with the concepts and conditions of the time. You're trying to find a middle ground. Reform, only the moral law is binding. Orthodoxy, all the law is binding. This conservative middle ground, well, the law is binding, but sometimes it can change. Those are the three major denominations of Judaism as we know it today, but there are others. Source 12 has ultra-Orthodoxy. Accordingly, Israel must be separated from the Gentiles in clothing, in custom, and in speech. Where all the other three denominations said we're going to follow the law and be modern, ultra-Orthodoxy says we're going to keep modernity at an arm's length away. That's why they often still speak Yiddish. That's why they're dressed like they're living in 1800s Poland with the black suits and the fur hats. But these denominations weren't the only responses to modernity. You also had Zionism. Source 13, Theodor Herzl. When we get to the bold, he says, in countries where we have lived for centuries, we are still cried down as strangers, and often by those whose ancestors were not yet domiciled in the land where Jews had already made experience of suffering. Yet in spite of all, we are loyal subjects, loyal as the Huguenots who were forced to emigrate. If only we could be left in peace. Let the sovereignty be granted over us a portion of the globe large enough to satisfy the requirements of a nation. The rest we shall manage for ourselves. The creation of the new state has in it nothing ridiculous or impossible. We have in our day witnessed the process in connection with other nations. So modernity happens. Germany is unified. Italy is unified. America exists, right? All these different things happen. And he's saying, why can't the Jews be like everyone else and have our own nation too? That's another response to modernity. I hate to skip it, but the other two you see in more modern times, a feminist response to in source 14, a feminist response to modernity, and in source 15, an LGBTQ or queer response to modernity. We have 6 minutes left. The point is now we have all these flavors which are basically all responding to modernity in different ways. Reform, the law is the law, moral law only, everything else we can choose. Orthodoxy, the law is the law, we're gonna keep it. Ultra-Orthodoxy, the law is the law and we're gonna keep modernity away. Zionism, the Jews can have a state just like everyone else. Of course, the question is, at what cost? And there's, of course, secularism. There are other denominations that we didn't even get into. Questions? Yes?
My question is on the hereafter. From my information, I've lived with families who are Jewish, and they told me that we don't really believe in the hereafter. That's something that was never taught to us or was not mentioned.
Yeah.
What is there the mentioning of the hereafter?
So the question is, what is the afterlife, or what's the Jewish approach to the afterlife? The basic answer is, the common answer is that Judaism doesn't focus on the afterlife. The common answer is that we focus on the here and now, what we do in this life, and then whatever happens afterwards. There are references here and there. The Tanakh, the Bible, does talk about Sheol, this thing under the earth where your soul might go to or something. It's not clear. It just says, oh my God, if I feel like I'm gonna pass out and die and my soul will go to Sheol. What does that mean? We don't know. The Talmud talks a lot about the world to come. Do they mean the Messianic age or the afterlife? It's not always clear. I met a Chabad rabbi once who believed in reincarnation. That is not mainstream at all, but he was a rabbi, he believed in it. He and I disagreed on a lot of things. So there is no one answer. The idea, Judaism does believe generally in the eternality of the soul, and that after life, somehow we will be connected with God. That's about all I can say, and what that means, but there is much more of a focus on the here and now. But I mean, we do say, in our memorial prayers, we say, God, watch over the soul of our loved one, and remember them, and all this. So there is this idea that that the soul has continued, but that's about all I can say. And even when you find smaller teachings, they're not mainstream at all. There is no one mainstream answer. Other questions? David, and then, yeah.
If you go through from source 12, Judaism certainly existed before Israel, which is essentially being, if you will, predicted or rehearsed. So the question is, can Judaism exist without Israel since before 48? That's one of the questions.
Yeah, so the connection between Judaism and Zionism, can Israel exist, or can the people of Israel exist without Zionism? So the answer is, can we? Of course. I think the reality is, right, like what would that look like? Because we're just in a different world now. What does the world look like without America? Could the world exist without America? Of course, it did before 1776, but it would be different now, right? So I think it's the same sort of like, who are we to predict that? What I will say is this, when it comes to Judaism and Israel, the Jews have always had a connection to the land of Israel, right? This is whether it's from the Torah or historically, there is a connection between the Jews and the land of Israel. They were expelled in 70 CE, but even since then, there was always a small remnant. The problem is, and problem I mean from like a geopolitical, how do we deal with this? Other people moved in, and the way I view it is there are two peoples with two stories on this land. How do we go from there, right? And so I think the reality is like both stories are true, both are real, there's pain on both sides. You know, it's, he does argue in it, actually. He brings up, he says, should it be in Argentina? Should it be in the Promised Land? He goes into it. I didn't bring it here. Well, there's always an issue when people are like, oh, we'll move to Uganda. Well, what about the Ugandans, right? So there's always the common saying back, let's say 50, 100 years ago, was you had a people without a land and a land without a people. It's perfect. Of course, they were overlooking the people in the land. What's hard is that, you know, the way I think about it is like you could take an apartment in World War II or any war zone. Someone's kicked out, evicted. Another family moves in. 20 years later, they say, I was evicted. Well, what do? There's no easy answer, right? And I think it's the same here. Anti-Semitism? How do you define anti-Semitism? You can't, I think. People have tried, and then people have lots of issues. Look, I think it's one of those, you know it when you see it, sort of things. To me, it has to do with, is it hatred or antagonism or something anti-Jewish that's unique to Jews? Saying Benjamin Netanyahu is terrible, not anti-Semitic. Benjamin Netanyahu is terrible because he's Jewish, pretty anti-Semitic. And then there's everything in between, right? So I think, you know, you can hold these, you can try saying, well, would you say that about any other person or country or whatever? And if the answer is yes, then maybe you're okay. And if not, then maybe it's an issue. I had an issue when I worked at Hopkins Hillel before this, where there was a birthright trip, right? A free trip for Jews to Israel. And a graduate student said, oh, should I go and fail this student because they have a birthright Israel sticker on their laptop? And at first I said, well, I mean, setting aside the like blatant, you shouldn't be failing people, the question was it anti-Semitism? And my gut initially said, well, you know, I can understand it. Birthright Israel has like, it's political and it's got its issues, except only Jews can go on Birthright Israel. So now you're only targeting Jews. And it sort of lifts up why and how this is murky and complicated. And it's 8:31. I'm happy to stick around and answer more questions. I just want to conclude, if you'll bear with me for 2 extra minutes. Share something you're taking away from today, or share something, a question you still have. And I will stick around and keep answering questions for those who want to stay. I apologize for, I knew this would happen. I tried. So what are you taking away? Yeah, Nash, talk with me, but what are you taking away, or what is a question you still have? And if I didn't get to it here, I'll try to answer it. What's a question you still have or something you're taking away?
I have maybe one question. So
Please.
You mentioned about the messianic age.
Yeah.
So what do you really mean by that? What does it mean by messianic age?
Yeah. So I'm trying not to answer this. The short answer is that the idea of a Messiah is from this early rabbinic era. The early Christians said Jesus is our Messiah. Jews said we are waiting. And one of the modern liberal ideas is that we're not actually waiting for a person, we're waiting for, it's an ideal age that we can build together.
My takeaway is
Please.
we commented on in a sermon recently about how 2 rabbis, Rashi and such, can take the same words and turn it and turn it and turn it and come up with so many different responses that there is no one
Exactly.
answer to anything. And that's what I'm reading.
There's no one answer. 2 more takeaways.
Yeah, I was in the same spot when I'm looking at this and thinking about you're painting the same wall over and
Yeah.
You know, how many layers and layers do you have on top of this
Yeah.
commentary on
Oh,
this
for sure.
short-
And
the problem
sometimes,
of making sense of all that is just
right? And sometimes it's really beautiful. Here they're arguing about a sukkah, but it comes up with these and these are the words of the ever-living God. That's beautiful. Elsewhere, they're saying, well, can you travel 4 cubits without eating? I don't know. And it's the driest thing you've ever read. Maybe. Or you do, but then you want to know more. You want to know more. You're never satisfied. I will never be satisfied.
They want to keep
Yeah, keep seeking. Perhaps. We are always questioning. Maybe we'll find answers. Thank you all. If you have more questions, please stick around. Otherwise, Nosh, thank you ICPC for setting this up.